Well, we can speak now to Dr. Victor Gao, who is the Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, who joins us from Beijing. Dr. Gao, always a pleasure talking to you. We've never talked about the state of relations between China and Iran before, so why don't we make that the starting point? How would you describe the state of ties between Beijing and Tehran?
Thank you very much for having me. China highly respects Iran as a sovereign nation with territorial integrity, and the two countries engage with each other on equal terms. And China does not recognize the extraterritoriality of any other country's one-sided and self-imposed sanctions against another country or against China. Therefore, when China deals with Iran, we deal with Iran in all spheres of relations, including energy cooperation. And I don't think this is a problem. And if a third country cries foul, the problem is really with itself, with its attempted extraterritoriality of its unilaterally imposed sanctions. And I think once this Israel-initiated war against Iran started, the Chinese government's position is very clear. Israel is in violation of a self-imposed war against a member of the United Nations, against its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and China really deplores Israel's military attack on nuclear facilities inside Iran and considered it as a very serious offense against world peace and security.
Okay, I mean, just to give you the Israeli line on what you just said, what we're told by Israeli officials repeatedly on this channel is that Iran is very close to being able to build a nuclear weapon. It might already be able to do so. And they're constantly calling for the destruction of Israel. So they say what they're doing is preemptive self-defense. What do you make of that argument?
It is of high hypocrisy for a country like Israel, which violated international convention in possessing nuclear weapon to start with. And now it's accusing another country, Iran, for attempting to acquire nuclear weapons. I don't think there are any higher level of double standard and hypocrisy for Israel to accuse another country of trying to possess nuclear weapons. I think the Middle East will be much better off if Israel arms itself with nuclear weapons, and no other country will want to possess nuclear weapons. That will probably create a better level playground for all the countries involved in the Middle East. For Israel to possess nuclear weapons and to constantly threaten other countries with nuclear attack is really a very serious problem. And I think international community really need to join together to put an end to such blatant violation of peace and security, not only in the Middle East, but in the world at large.
We've heard from the president of China, President Xi Jinping, saying on Tuesday that China is, quote, deeply worried about Israel's military operation against Iran. Where do you think you and the president of China see things heading to? Why the worry? How dangerous could the situation be?
Well, as a general point, China is always worried if a war breaks out. And this time, this war is a complete surprise attack launched by Israel against a sovereign and independent country like Iran. And the fact that this surprise attack took place when the United States and Iran are still engaged in discussions about how to end this nuclear problem is particularly surprising. It's, in my best judgment, is like the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in the Second World War. And I think Israel has also committed all the crimes in massively killing the government officials, military officials of Iran. And no country should tolerate any other country like Israel to commit such massive amount of assassinations before a formal declaration of war against Iran, for example. So I think the Chinese president is legitimately worried about the scale of the attack, the potential loss of life, as well as the potential escalation of the situation, because you never know how this situation may evolve eventually, whether it will get out of control, whether it will escalate from conventional war to nuclear war, for example, or whether, ironically, it will force Iran to really develop a nuclear weapon, and what will be the consequence for Israel and Iran to both have nuclear weapons. Do they really want to use nuclear weapons against each other? What will be the consequence for peace and security in the Middle East and in the world at large? Therefore, it is time to call on Prime Minister Netanyahu, stop all the craziness. He probably wants to save his political skin rather than really serving the fundamental interest of the people in Israel to launch such unilateral, self-imposed surprise attack on a big country, a great country like Iran.
Dr. Gao, on Tuesday, China accused the US President Trump of pouring oil on the conflict there between Iran and Israel. Why and how does Beijing see the United States making things worse with regards to this situation?
Well, I think evidence points out to a joint operation by the United States and Israel against the country of Iran. They probably have a division of work. The United States was not very much involved on the surface of the situation, but no one should be surprised if the United States highly coordinates its information gathering, etc., with Israel. And the fact that Israel has kept saying that the United States is involved from the very beginning of the war, etc., illustrates the level of cooperation and collaboration between the United States and Israel against Iran. And the United States still keeps saying that they are not involved, but then they need to come up with a proof that they are not involved. And not being involved is not sufficient. And the United States really need to pull all their levers to force Israel to stop this war against Iran, and also to stop Israel from misusing the United States, creating all the misinformation about that the United States and Israel are working together to, for example, destroy Iran or to create a regime change in Iran, etc. So I think it is time for the United States. My personal concern is that if the United States really gets bogged down in this war against Iran, no one knows what will happen to the United States in the coming years or coming decades.
Well, that could be beneficial for China, couldn't it? Because if the United States spends large sums of money, a considerable amount of time and attention on affairs in the Middle East, that leaves China to do what it wants to do in a more, let's say, unrestrained way.
Allow me to emphasize one point. China always benefits by protecting peace and stability anywhere in the world. And China will feel very much at a loss if peace and stability and prosperity anywhere in the world will be damaged by especially unilaterally imposed war of one country against the other country. Therefore, such benefit, if any, that China will enjoy is not for China's own benefit. It is for peace and stability and the well-being of mankind. It is time to stop Israel in this war against Iran and to prevent the United States from really joining this war together with Israel, which may escalate the situation and create unprepared consequences for mankind as a whole.
You mentioned regime change in your earlier response, and I want to pick up on that because we heard from President Trump on social media saying, quote, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but he is safe there. We're not going to take him out, at least not for now." How would China react if the United States did, or if Israel did, kill the supreme leader?
This is exactly the confusion that President Trump is creating deliberately or unintentionally. I don't think assassination of a head of state or head of government or political leaders or military leaders of another country is the right thing to do in the world of today. I think countries need to have the minimum decency and the protocol in dealing with another country. Assassination is the bad thing, and assassination may serve as a boomerang, eventually may come back to hurt yourself and haunt you. Therefore, engaging in assassination, especially against head of state or leader of another religious faith, for example, or against the major political and military leaders of another sovereign country, is the wrong thing to do, especially at a time when Israel has self-imposed this undeclared war in a surprise attack against Iran. This is the worst time for the head of the state of the United States to imply that assassination may be involved in killing the leader of Iran.
You mentioned in your first answer, you painted a picture of a very cordial set of relations, cordial ties between Beijing and Tehran. Let me put this scenario to you. If Iran goes the same way as, for example, Syria, and the assassination that you mentioned, or otherwise, brings about a change of management, shall we say, in Iran, I mean, that would be a loss for China, wouldn't it? Because you'd have lost an ally, a key ally in this region. Because if a pro-Western government replaces the government that's there already, that would be a loss for China, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think China has always the long perspective and historical perspective to look at any contemporary events, like what had happened in Syria and what is happening in Iran. We are not confused by the events on a day-to-day basis. We look at the situation in 10 years, in 100 years, sometimes 500 years, if not even longer. Therefore, in the historical perspective, if you really look at the situation in the long-haul perspective, war is bad. For Israel to impose an undeclared war on Iran is an aggression. And whatever Iran is doing is justified because they are defending their own sovereignty and territorial integrity. They are fighting back against aggressors. And if the United States wants to join Israel to become an aggressor against Iran, well, history will eventually have its own verdict. Therefore, I think all of us need to work on with Israel to stop the war as quickly as possible and come up with peaceful ways to negotiate with Iran. And I personally will completely support the ending of whatever nuclear weapon program, if any, by Iran. And I do hope Israel will also dispossess nuclear weapons and Middle East will become a nuclear-free zone. That will be in the best interest of all the countries in that particular part of the world. China will do its best to promote the real justified result for any such tension or conflict of war, and China will do its best to prevent the war from escalating or from spreading out, impacting on more countries and hurting more people in that part of the world.
The United States and some of its allies view China as being part of what it now calls Krink, which is this new acronym which is being bandied around quite a bit by foreign policy talking heads on television channels all over the world. Krink meaning China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. I don't know what you think of that acronym, if you've heard it used much before, but let me just ask you this. Were the United States to intervene and join forces with Israel in a very overt way and join that conflict, do you see a day that China or Russia or other actors could perhaps join in support of Iran?
Well, imposing a war on a great country like Iran with 1.66 million square kilometers and with up to more than 90 million people, and a country which has tremendous amount of spiritual leadership among the Shia people throughout the world, is really poking for more disaster if it is not stopped right away. And if other countries want to join the fight on the side of Israel, I will urge them to stop that right away. And if, for example, other countries want to join the fight against Iran, you never want to exclude the possibility that other major countries want to fight together with Iran, because the war imposed on Iran is the unjustified war. It's a war of aggression. It's undeclared war. It's a surprise attack. And any people, any country under such surprise attack, an attack of aggression, has full legal justification to fight back. Therefore, stopping the war right now is the best way. Allowing it to escalate and to get out of control will most likely hurt the fundamental interests of the people in Israel, as well as in Iran and in many other countries in that particular part of the world. And I think China is doing the right thing, urging on Israel to stop the war, urging on Iran not to escalate, for example, try to wrap up the situation so that all parties involved can talk about peace rather than war and war and war. China does not like war of any kind, and China does not want to see any country launching a war of aggression against another country.
And just lastly, that acronym, Krink, viewed as being a group of hostile or adversarial nations by Washington and some of its allies. What do you make of it? What do you make of the acronym?
First of all, whatever acronyms you come up with, it cannot change the fact that China today is the major force defending peace and stability and development in the world. And the fact that China is the largest trading nation with more than 140 countries in the world speaks eloquently about what China really cares about. That is, promoting peace, defending free trade, for example. If anyone wants to confuse China with a force against the peace, then he or she is either out of their mind or completely falsifying the situation against China. Now, I would urge the United States, don't mess around with China. Don't view China as an enemy. China is not an enemy of the United States. China has tremendous amount of goodwill for the American people. And China and the United States, like President Trump said, if they work together, they can work out miracles and no problem in the world cannot be overcome. And there will be better peace and stability and better future for mankind as a whole. If anyone bets that China and the United States will have a war against each other, let me tell you, they are wrong. I always promote the inevitability of peace between China and the United States. War is not and should not be viewed as an option between China and the United States. And China and the United States have added the responsibility to promote peace and to bring this war, for example, initiated by Israel against Iran to a stop as quickly as possible for the benefit of mankind. No one should allow Prime Minister Netanyahu try to saving his own political scheme from justice at home and justice in Hague by launching this war of aggression against Iran. He will not be able to escape from the reach of law, either both inside Israel as well as in The Hague.
Okay, well, on that note, we wrap up. Thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, Dr. Victor Gao.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.